can go now.
Hello and welcome to the Property Podcast
Isn't it honest property?
Oh yeah. Hello and welcome to Honest Property Podcast, where we're your hosts, Rebecca and Ruth. What's so funny?
Because you really enunciate
Do it?
honest proper
Because
tea.
it's property.
Right. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what our experience has been like being a woman in the property industry, or real estate, as the Americans would say. And this episode is full of little anecdotes of our experiences, especially since we started about 10 years ago as fresh-faced, still at university, 20-year-olds. Life's changed a lot since then, but
Yes.
there are a lot of experiences to share coming from that sort of background of being a young female. Because at the time, we were not connected or knew of anybody else who were anything like us.
No, we were reading, I guess you call like the self-help books, personal development. We didn't really have a lot of people in our circles that were doing the same thing. And admittedly, also had people, you know, taking the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it had its peaks and troughs. So sometimes it was an advantage. Sometimes, for the most part, in honesty, it wasn't. Regarding how you felt about yourself, it was a lot of trying to build a thick layer of skin when it
Yeah.
came to how people's assumptions of you. So I think the first story time that we could share today is when we went to London. When
That was our first meeting with a investor that we wanted to make a relationship with to be able to acquire some private financing within like an angel investor for our first property. And so it was a really like I am grateful for the experience because it taught we taught we I'm grateful for the experience because it taught us a lot, but it wasn't very pleasant.
No. So we were, it was myself and Ruth, and we had another person with us who was,
Another lady who was also looking to get into property investing. She
yeah,
was a little bit older than us.
yes, but she was quite well connected with other people who were also interested in investing. But we were all having a meeting together to see if we could group together resources, basically,
Yeah.
to pursue any projects together. And this guy was introduced to us because he was our dad's friend's
Connection.
brother,
Yeah,
something.
connection.
And we went to visit him
In
in
London.
Knightsbridge, London. So
Yeah.
it was a really nice area, and we went into his office, and his arrogance was off the charts, and it made us feel extremely uncomfortable. We were explaining to he was open to the meeting. He created the meeting. And then when we went into his office, he didn't like that 3 women had entered his office, even though he knew we were coming. He said that it's actually he said from his part it was interrogating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, well then I don't know what to say because you knew we were coming.
Yeah.
And then like if we're all bringing something to the table, then what's the problem? And then he sat there saying that he had people who were invested in doing some development opportunities, and that when they came to visit London from wherever they were from, that we could go off and entertain them. And I was like, that's not the kind of value we're bringing here.
Yeah.
We're not here to wine and dine your connections so that you don't have to do it when they're your connections in order to seal a deal. It was very peculiar.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a request. It was sort of a, that's what's going to happen.
He was in his suit. I think everyone in the area working in that area was also suited and booted.
Yeah, he obviously had to uphold some sort of image in the area. That's my assumption.
But
But it was he came across as extremely rude
he wasn't
and
really listening to anything that we had to say. And he sat back in his chair
with
with his
his
arms crossed and his feet on the
on the table.
table. And I never felt so disrespected. Uh, that was just since that was like our first meeting with into a world of, I guess, our first introduction to what you'd say was like property and doing business properly. And I didn't like it. And I thought, I don't want to be investing in anyone or anyone investing in us who has that sort of attitude. Um, it was just not.
It was like meeting a Wolf of Wall Street. It
Yeah,
was like
we were like, we don't actually want to be part of
no.
something like that. We want to do business in a way that feels right.
And I think that's one of the biggest learning curves here that we didn't really realize at the time, that at the time we didn't feel like we had many options regarding to what a networking circle would look like.
And also, there's an idea as well when we were like reading these personal development books. A lot of them were like, you gotta hustle, you gotta. This is a way to be in
Very
business.
male
Very
oriented
orientated,
of
yeah.
male oriented way
So
of
we thought
working.
this is how
Yeah.
it's supposed to be, but it just didn't. And then we actually met someone like that in real life, and it made me feel very small.
Yeah. And I think that the lesson that I was trying to get at is that you don't have to, and we didn't realize we didn't have any other options regarding networking. And what, like, if our network didn't look like that, then what would our success look like? We felt
Exactly.
pressured
Yeah.
to be in those situations, and that your network or the people around you, now we know we're successful now with our portfolio and our investments, and it we don't you don't have to work with people you don't want to work with, that don't make
Yeah.
you feel good. Like, the pool is so much more open now with all sorts of people who've chosen to be investors, and the beauty of social media and
It shows that investors look all
all
different. Or,
sorts of ways. There
yeah.
isn't one way that an
Which we
investor
didn't know that
looks.
at the time. So
No.
there was, because that was the idea of what an investor looked like, in a very masculine, suited way,
Yeah.
and it just didn't fit. It just
No.
didn't fit.
No. And then on just another story, but same sort of setup. We were pitching it was like an old pub that was going to be converted into flats. Um and I was pitching this to an investor.
With the same lady.
Yeah, interesting. So there was the lady that joined us in the first meeting. She introduced us to a couple of other investors who were very interested in property development. And like I said, it was a pub being converted into flats, and I had practiced and made this pitch, and I was getting ready, and literally at the last hour, the lady who did the introduction to the investor was like, your dad needs to be in the meeting. And I said, why? And she said, because they're not going to trust you. As she basically said that because I was a young female, I wasn't going to be as credible. What I'm saying isn't going to be as credible as if it would be if it came from my father's mouth.
Mm.
So that really felt like a dagger in the heart.
But
As
not even that. It was that our dad was also a white male.
Yeah, I think the investors were foreign investors, and historically, um, our dad had been, admittedly, some of the companies that he'd worked for in the past, his persona as a Western man
Western, yeah.
was a selling feature for the company, because they liked this sort of Western uh,
Look.
look. It seemed maybe it was it was seen as like a level of authority and experience, which in honesty, he has a lot of authority and experience, but not in our industry.
No.
Um, so that really was a dagger in the heart when she said, "We need your dad to be on the on the we need your dad to be in the room, and he needs to say it because they're not going to take you seriously because you're a young woman." And she said that right before I went in. So my gut had already, I felt like my guts had already been pulled out when she said it. And I basically had to sort of really awkwardly guide my dad through what I'm trying to relay to these investors. And he had to do his very best. Bless him for being a good sport. um,
But he doesn't know anything
to
about
yeah,
property
to relay
investing.
what I'm trying to say to these investors, and he just it wasn't his knowledge, and it's just so sad that I had to use an older male face to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and even with our first story about the guy who put his foot on the table and with his arms crossed, even at the end of the pitch, he was like still trying to try and get us to set a meeting with our dad to be able to discuss talking to him about business over us, and it just was just soul crushing to not feel like, even though you have the knowledge, because of our age and because of us being women, we would still not be taken seriously, even though we had all the knowledge.
Mm. And oftentimes when I think the other thing about being a woman, and if you're managing your own properties, then that means you have to do the viewings yourself, which can oftentimes, like for our first few properties, they were in the less desirable areas, let's say. Um, but when you're doing viewings for tenants, it's a really good idea to make sure that somebody's outside waiting for you, because it could be
We would be messaging each other to say, let us know when you arrive and then when you're leaving.
yeah, because you might have a viewing. You're basically meeting random people off of the internet who want to
Yeah.
view the house, and
Or if
you're
it,
in the house alone with a stranger.
yeah, and if they're wanting to view a lot later after work and it might be dark, then it was advised to make sure that you bring someone with you.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just another thing that is sort of
Not really discussed.
no, but you do have to take care as a female when it comes to doing that. And on the positive side, sometimes when we were doing viewings, they didn't think that we were the landlord. And that's something you could use if you want to establish like a bit of distance
Boundary.
or a boundary between
Yeah.
yourself and the tenant. Because if they assume that you're the letting agent and they need to come to you to address a problem, you can be like, "Oh, give me a moment." It just buys you a little bit of time to get to address the problem. Just be like, "Let me check this with the landlord." Um, so I think that's like a small pro, a small win. It was also funny actually, if we were looking for properties ourselves and we were doing viewings ourselves, they'd be like, "So who's this?" Like they wouldn't believe that we're the ones who are investing. They were like, "Who's this property? Who's this property going to be for?" Um, not realizing that we were going to be the investor.
I had a viewing once where I was asked, I don't know if it was with Tom, but like I had a viewing once where I was, um, I don't know why I was by myself, but I was basically, maybe it was a joke, but saying how oh, you're going to have to run this by your husband. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
I've I've been hit on several times
Oh, God, yeah.
doing viewings. I got
Even with tenants.
even with tenants, they send me a little winky face, but you know, it got them in there, didn't it? Joking.
No, we did have that one tenant that
try and
really
make a
liked
silver
you.
lining. Who?
But that guy, is he the one that had like a glass eye? Who was the
I don't
guy? Or
know.
no, yeah, well, remember that guy, and he was a very good tenant, but he was like super happy about when you came to visit.
Oh yeah, I got gifts. I'd get gifts and like winky faces and little hearts and stuff. But you know, as long as they're happy tenants and they got in and they were happy, like if I made their day, you made mine because you became a tenant. But yeah, it's interesting being a woman in real estate, especially when you're a young one. And I think as time goes on,
Mm,
you sort of establish your boundaries. And as the pool of the variety of investors that are out there have like entered the scene, then
yeah,
you realize you just want to work with who you want to work with.
yeah,
If my gut, I'm like now that we're in our 30s, if my gut is saying this is not right,
yeah.
it's
Obviously,
not
if the
right.
numbers aren't right, and then your gut is also saying this ain't right, then
Get
it's not
out.
right. Get
Yeah,
out. And you
get
should
out.
only work with people that, at the end of the day, if you're doing business with people, you should work with people that you really trust. And there is no point in trying to force something, because a business relationship is a relationship at the end of the day.
And
And
if you want it to be a long lasting one, then it's got to be one that you're happy to continue.
yeah, but there are so many more people now, especially on social media. I feel like social media has opened doors for women, especially, that we can see, because we've connected with a lot of women online now, which is really great. So
Yay.
we found a lot of people who are like us, which we didn't have before. Um, and it's nice to see as well older women also in the space, because we didn't have that sort of role models in the property industry. This is why I no longer dye my hair, to keep my grey hairs in, to show that I am wise. I've earned these lines.
Yes.
Basically, if you're a young girl, young lady in property, the
Yep.
best advice that we would say now is that the digital world is just amazing. And it really, there's so many people, especially women, that you'll find someone that you'll be able to relate to. We didn't have that in the beginning, and it was very isolating. And now that there is such a huge space online, you're going to be able to find someone, and know that you just crack on and don't give up. There's more advantages for women now
Yeah.
than there used to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
take
yeah.
grab it by the horns.
So our advice, if you're a young woman starting in property, is like Ruth mentioned before, the digital world is amazing.
Yeah.
Go and connect with people who are like you. Go seek the people who represent you and act
Who
as a role
Yeah,
model.
who invest how you want to invest. I think that's a big take.
Yeah, and operate in the way that you operate. Investing is such a personal choice,
So we say this all the time, but it's so personal.
and there's so many ways to do it. And you just need to connect yourself, network with people, find the people who are like you, read the books written. If you're going to get into education, get the resources that are written by people who are like you. All
Yeah.
of the self-development stuff and the property stuff were written by guys,
Written by
and
guys, yeah.
they're great sources of information, but you have to have um a work ethic that was also guided to you, illustrated to you, that was done by a woman,
So
because we don't work the same way as
no,
men.
so read a lot more personal development books now that are actually written by women,
Women,
or they're written by men, but they are in what's the word?
they're
They
including
they're
the
include
female perspective into
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the world's changed. I think if you are feeling alone, then you can just reach out to us, follow us. We've been there as young 20-year-olds. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this podcast episode. Um, like I said, if you need any advice or if you want any help, reach out to us on Instagram. In our DMs is the best place, at Honest Property Sisters. And we really look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.